Today, I'm creating an underwater seeing card that combines a few of my favorite techniques, including coloring with Olo markers, ink blending with Distress Oxides, and a fun technique I haven't used in a while, which is stamping with a stencil using the reactive properties of the Distress Oxide inks. It adds such a unique and subtle texture to the background that really enhances that underwater vibe. Some of the products I'm using today is the Snappy birthday stamp set, the Solo Smile wafer die, and then the Smile stamp set bundle. I have been loving that Smile bundle. So off screen, I kind of laid out my card design where I wanted my images to go and where the sentiments were going to be. So I did take a picture of that off screen so I could save that for reference. Then I placed all of these stamp images into my Misti, and I am using the Lawn Fawn 80-pound white cardstock, and I'm stamping the images in the Lawn Fawn jet black ink, which is safe for alcohol markers. Now I can start coloring in my sharks. So for the color combination I'm using today, again, it is Olo markers, and I'm using B4.7, B4.6, and B4.3. I started with the darkest color, which is the B4.7, and I added that around areas that I kind of thought would be the shadow area of the shark, and then blended out with the remaining colors. So my main thing is I really just kind of wanted to have one side of the shark or one area of the shark be darker and then have it get lighter as it goes on, because that's what's going to make this a little more dimensional of an image and not so flat looking. I do try to take into consideration the direction that the stamp is pointing. So, for instance, this shark right there in the middle is kind of facing over to the left. So, because it's facing the left, I'm kind of looking at that as it's facing a light source. So, I'm putting the darker color on the right hand side. Now, some of them can be a little tricky sometimes to figure out. And when I do stumble into those, I just typically will add a dark area on each side, and then keeping the center of the image the lighter area where, or I guess to say that's where I'm adding the highlight. For the underside of the shark, I did experiment a little bit with colors. I brought in a B 0.2 and then a C1 and a C0. I was trying to not make it so gray looking. I wanted it to have just a hint of a blue, I guess, tint to it. So I did experiment with placing that B 0.2 down first, and I also placed it at the end. I don't know if I could really tell a difference, but I did need to add some color there just to go along with keeping my sharks dimensional. Don't be afraid to experiment with your markers. Now, for the bubbles, I did a B 0.2 and B 0.3. So, coloring them first with that lighter color and then adding a line of that darker color. For the seaweed, I have a G 1.4 and a G 1.5. So I started off by coloring it with the lightest color, which is the G 1.4, and then adding that darker color just to one side of each of it. So I didn't really blend it out that much because there isn't much of a color difference between those two shades. So just by adding even a line of color without really blending is going to give you that dimension as well. Then we have this sandbar that one of the sharks is going to be floating above. And for that, I did an OR 3.8, OR 3.7, and OR 3.4. So I looked at it as where would the darkest points be? And that is where I started with the darkest shade. Every now and then, I do add flicks with my marker. That sometimes will just help add even more texture to the image, and then I can blend it out. I don't feel I really need to go over my colors very often. Sometimes with the bigger areas like this, I might come back in with the medium, the middle tone of my markers to help spread that out. Because sometimes I'll get a little bit too dark with my colors. And by adding in that mid tone and the light tone will help kind of blend that together. Now, I did jump over to my Copics for this part. I still use my Copics every now and then. I'm not just strictly an Olo marker user because sometimes there's just colors that I really want to use from my Copic collection. I'm bringing in some various markers to color in the seashell down there, the rocks, and then also that star. So I just kind of I actually have my markers in an Olo tower. So I grab them really quick to help fill in those smaller pieces. Then also the sunglasses, the mouth for the shark. And I am going to color the umbrella there. And I did some reds because I really like reds when it comes to combining them with these blue shades for the shark. So I did R1.5 and R1.7 for the umbrella. All of these colors are going to be listed over on my blog. I do have a supply list linked down below in the video description and over on my blog. So if you're interested in any of these, you can definitely check that out. I lined up the coordinating die for all of the images and I'm running them through my Gina K Designs intricate die cut machine to cut them out. For the background for my card, I am digging out my Distress Oxide inks. I feel like I haven't used these in forever, and I really miss doing technique videos with things like my Distress Oxide inks because they are so water reactive. This one I started with Salvaged Patina. I also want to mention if you are just getting into ink blending, Distress Oxides are a great place to start because they are a combination of dye and pigment ink, so they blend really well together. They kind of layer over the top of each other, and I'll show you what I mean by that. This second color I'm bringing in is Mermaid Lagoon. You can see I am overlapping slightly into the salvaged patina, and on the other side, I'm bringing in Uncharted Mariner. So that I will also blend into that Mermaid Lagoon. Now, what I'll do is I'll go back over my colors to help smooth out that transition. And the Mermaid Lagoon, when I come back over it, I can actually apply that over the top of that darker color and it's going to help smooth that out. It's not going to take it away completely, but it does help kind of bring that color back in a little bit more. And I am using a dome foam blending tool. I haven't used these in forever either, but I do enjoy using them with my Distress Oxides. Another technique I haven't done in forever is what I call stencil stamping. So I have the dots on dots stencil from Simon Says Stamp and I'm spritzing water on it. And what I want is I want to see the water kind of bead up on the stencil a little bit. I did add a little bit more with my distress sprayer and then I'm flipping that over and placing that down on top of my ink blended background. I will place a piece of paper towel over the top and then something heavy, which I'll just use my Misty tool for now, and I'll let that sit for maybe a minute or so. It really doesn't take that long for the reactive properties to kind of kick in. And when I remove the stencil, wherever the water was, reacted with the Distress Oxide background, and it gives it a really fun textured look. Off screen, I die cut the word smile off of the or from the Solo Smile wafer die. I die cut it 3 times from Poppy cardstock from Concord and Ninth, and then I'm using my craft glue to layer them together to build the dimension for my stacked sentiment as well. And there is also a shadow die for it that I die cut out of white cardstock that I'm going to place over the top. Now, the background, I don't think I mentioned, but for the blending, I did that on Hammermill cardstock. I'm going to use the Smile Stamp Set Bundle to stamp an additional sentiment to go underneath. This again is just using Hammermill cardstock. I'm stamping that in a Versafine Clear black ink. And then I'm using the sentiment label die from Simon Says Stamp to trim that out. I have a side folding card base that I added a tape runner to, and I am going to place my blended panel right over the top. So I am not trimming down this background at all because I wanted to make sure I'm leaving room for all of my images and kind of giving them room to breathe. I didn't want to cluster them all in one area. So I'm placing everything out right now. I did take a little bit of a tape runner, add it to the bottom of one of the sharks to place it on that little, I'm just going to call it a sandbar for right now. So that is technically one piece. Then I'm adding foam tape behind all of the shark images. I'm going to add liquid glue to the back of my sentiment. I am not popping that up with foam squares or foam tape because I already have dimension to it. And I started that at the very top. So now I'm going to bring in that sentiment strip to go underneath. I remembered I have a T-square ruler. I actually have multiples of them. I just forget where I place them. And I'm using that to help me line up my sentiment straight underneath that die cut smile. Then I can start building my scene. I did start with the largest image down there at the bottom, trying to center that as best as I can with the smile sentiment, and then bringing in the other sharks around the image. I really debated between adding the stamped bubbles or using some blue sequins, but the bubbles won out because I think it just really added to the scene a little bit more than sequins did. And to add a little bit of sparkle to this, I am bringing in Stardust Stickles going over each of the bubbles. And I'm going to bring in a white gel pen to add highlights because I do like adding the highlights to kind of these cutesy images. Definitely optional. You don't have to do that, but I think it helps bring that out a little bit. And that is going to finish off my card. So, thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope this underwater scene inspires you to try mixing techniques like coloring, ink blending, or even stencil stamping in your own projects. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment. Let me know if you've tried any of these techniques. And subscribe to my channel if you would like more crafty inspiration. So, until next time, happy crafting. Here is another video I think you might enjoy.